Hello fun people, today I want to discuss the final adventure of DuckTales. After airing new episodes for 4 years, Bradford Buzzard has been defeated, F.O.W.L has been taken down, Webby's origins have been revealed, and the McDuck family has never been stronger. But to get to that point, they have had to go through a lot of hardships on that journey. Throughout 3 seasons of this show, the McDucks had to deal with family secrets, betrayals, and massive threats to Duckburg, but every time they got through it, even though there was one enemy that constantly loomed in the background, waiting for Scrooge McDuck to fall. Bradford Buzzard was the leader of an organization built to create order and destroy chaos, which eventually evolved to become the fiendish organization for world larceny. And in The Last Adventure, we learn a large portion of that desire for control of everything around Bradford came from his experience with his grandmother, the legendary explorer Isabella Finch.
You see, you and I are cut from the same coonskin hat. We're both searching for Finch's missing mysteries, for knowledge, for understanding, for the good of mankind.
In fact, we learn Bradford grew up going on adventures with his grandmother and was raised as the first junior woodchuck, but eventually turned away from the fun and educational skirmishes to instead focus on reducing the unpredictability of the world. And after analyzing the last 100 years, he came to the conclusion that chaos followed one duck.
All these events of the past century have one man in common. Who could it be?
No matter how much Bradford Buzzard tried to rein in Scrooge though, his endeavors only continued to grow larger and his family did the same. And once he realized Scrooge needed to be stopped, he decided to use the full power of his influence, knowledge, and resources within F.O.W.L to take down the richest duck in the world. If you'd like a more in-depth look at how he formed this organization and who was recruited to its ranks, I'll leave a link to my discussions on F.O.W.L's origins below. But really, what's important to know is that from the very beginning, Bradford aligned himself with evildoers and villains who were ready to do whatever it took to obtain riches and power. He claimed he was not a bad guy, but in his heart, he had dark desires and was perfectly okay with manipulating and using everyone around him to achieve his goals.
Your uncle is remarkable, but at what cost? How many people must live in fear of being captured by aliens or attacked by their own shadow?
And one of the most shocking ways Bradford used F.O.W.L is actually connected to Webby Vanderquack. You see, in this series finale, Webby's origins were finally explored. As soon as the McDuck family discovered May and June within F.O.W.L and we learned that they were nearly identical to Webby, suddenly the young duck's whole existence began to be questioned, which was an idea I thought was going to be brought up a lot more throughout the 3rd season. Early on, when we were introduced to the harp of Nirvana, it seemed clear that Webby's grandmother, Mrs. Beakley, was lying to her about something. At the time, I thought her parents could have been F.O.W.L, and finally that mystery has been undone, and unfortunately, I was kind of close to the truth. Sure, early on, Benton had tried to explain who Webby's parents were without fully divulging the full extent of what she knew about where Webby came from, but that wasn't the full truth.
Your mother was an artist. Your father was a librarian, and by all accounts, a very nice man.
As Webby bonded with May and June in a similar way to how she had with Huey, Dewey, and Louie when they first arrived at the mansion, by showing them out of their confined room and showing them her family tree, she questioned what she had been told more and more by her granny until she inevitably discovered the truth on her adventures within F.O.W.L's headquarters. You see, when Beakley was put in front of the harp of Nirvana, she confessed that Webby had been an experiment by F.O.W.L, who she had rescued and hidden within the McDuck manor. Ludwig von Drake would later go on to explain and clarify that she was a clone based on Uncle Scrooge's DNA.
Who is Webby made from? Why, your old Uncle Scrooge McDuck, of course.
Now, the reason why Black Heron and Bradford created a descendant of Scrooge McDuck was necessary because F.O.W.L desired to obtain one of Finch's treasures that had been lost because of Scrooge McDuck when Donald and Della went on their first adventure with their uncle, which we saw earlier in season 3. Back then, Scrooge hid the papyrus of binding to everyone except his heir, who would be able to find the document at its resting place. Therefore, the only way for Bradford to be able to have access to the papyrus papyrus, which had the ability to alter reality itself, was to order a daughter of Scrooge to be constructed, which actually meant that Bentona never truly lied about the people who created Webby. Black Heron was the artist and scientist who had developed her, and Bradford was the librarian who was looking to document and destroy the treasures his grandmother had sought after. Once Webby was able to actually obtain the papyrus of binding, though, she learns the truth that she was only created to defeat Scrooge McDuck, and that gave Bradford the opportunity to end his nemesis. After divulging his evil plan, Bradford used the Sword of Swanstantine, which had previously been reconstructed through the efforts of the McDuck family within the hidden city of Istanbul. With the sword, he gained magical power to allow him to subdue Uncle Scrooge long enough for Scrooge to realize that Bradford had the capability to end the lives of everyone who was close to him using something called the Selego Vortex. Now, at first, that was a relic of the show I admittedly did not remember at all, but I came to discover that vortex was created by Bradford altering the technology from the ramrod that had been seen in the Darkwing Duck special Let's Get Dangerous.
It's Selego's circuit. Selego was a mad thinker who believed that every story, every work of fiction was actually a window into an alternate dimension.
The Selego Vortex no longer teleports objects to other dimensions. It eliminates them from existence.
But while Bradford was confident the Selego Vortex would be capable of destroying all of the unpredictable adventures in the world, he did not have faith that anything could unravel Scrooge McDuck forever, since he'd already tried to do that by advising McDuck Industries and leading Della Duck to the Spear of Selene. Yeah, Bradford had been the one to manipulate Della to use an experimental rocket which tore apart the McDuck family for years. But Scrooge and his family always found a way to come back, which was why he wanted the wealthy duck to sign away his adventures in exchange for the lives of his family. An act that would be able to be bound legally and mystically with the papyrus of binding. But even after Scrooge agreed to the terms, the document degraded as soon as Huey, Dewey, Louie, and Webby came to see the contradiction in Bradford's request. Scrooge couldn't be simultaneously removed from having any adventures while having a family, because a family was one of the greatest adventures in the world. With that realization, the contract was destroyed, and Scrooge was freed, leading to Bradford dropping his sword and losing his grand power. But he wouldn't be stopped completely until Scrooge's most notorious villains, who had been imprisoned and controlled by Bradford's henchmen, rose to defeat him by transforming the cunning leader into a mindless buzzard. The dangerous organization that had infiltrated the McDuck family had been disassembled. The individual who had established it was neutralized, and the truth about Webby being Scrooge's daughter was finally revealed. We also found out that Donald and Daisy were deeply in love, Manny was a demon, Launchpad was finally able to receive recognition as someone who inspired so many to become heroes, and Huey, Dewey, and Louie had truly come into their own. The McDucks had all found their place in the world, and even though their story was over, I'm sure they will have adventures long into the future. I remember watching DuckTales on my phone in 2017 during my first year of college, and now I'm graduated, living on my own. This show just has so many good memories for me over such a tumultuous period of my life. Truly, I appreciated all of the hard work, the brilliant humor, and the unending connections, references, and charm that was poured into this show. Every treasure and character meant something. And while I came to this show for Donald Duck, at the end of the adventure, I grew to love an entire family. Thanks, DuckTales team. In my opinion, you gave us one of the best Disney Channel shows I've ever watched. There's a lot more I want to discuss in detail, but until then, thank you to my patrons and channel members. Thanks for watching, and have a magical day. Woo!